There we go.
John Hancock here, and I got a special guest here on my channel today. This is Chris Trimew of Lost Classics. He also is a previous employee of the wonderful company Working Designs, which made awesome translations from Japanese RPGs such as Lunar 1 and Lunar 2 are probably the most popular.
I would say so, yeah.
All right, so Chris, what do you want to say about your... want to say something quick about your time working at Working Designs?
It was crazy.
Okay.
We started a couple fires that we had to put out, but it was an overall very positive experience, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Awesome, yeah. And Chris and I have been friends for several years. We've done some projects together. Chris is a programmer and has done several projects on his own. He's currently working on one right now under wraps, but
we'll show it off at Cowlitz.
That's right. That's right. And so I'm actually having Chris. Chris is the appropriate person to have this discussion, and we were talking, and I brought up a discussion, and I thought it was very fitting for this week. Of do we need new retro gaming hardware?
Well, I think a lot of it is going to hinge on what you describe as new.
Okay.
Like, do we need new clone consoles to replace old broken hardware like Super Nintendos and Nintendos, Genesises, things like that? Or do we need new hardware to make new games like the Coleco Mini Super Nintendo, Chameleon, whatever you want to call it these days?
Yeah, so I definitely think that's a good point. And so one thing I want to say is, yes, I do think we need what I call replacement hardware.
Yeah. And
replacement hardware would be something like Raspberry Pi, emulation hardware that runs emulators of older games, I think is needed. I would love for someone to make something to play Atari games with like an HDMI out.
That would be excellent.
It would be great if they could do it. I mean, I think there's a fan base for it. I do think replacement hardware is needed. What I don't think is needed, and again, feel free to jump in. Like,
yes,
we don't need new hardware playing retro themed games that only play certain games and not all the games, and charging $30 to $40 for games that you can play elsewhere a lot cheaper.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
We saw with the Ouya how well that worked out, which was exactly what you're saying. It's a new console that they make to play old games, but the question from like a developer standpoint is, if I'm putting in all this work, why don't I open it up to a huge market like Steam or Xbox or PlayStation Store? Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Why would you put it on a tiny system with a very small install base?
Yeah, it's silly, and I know that people, I was a big fan of the Ouya, but let's be honest here. Everybody liked the Ouya for its emulators.
Well, let's not say everybody liked the Ouya.
But I like the Ouya for the simplicity of emulation. You can play a lot of emulation for very little setup. You essentially would just install an emulator off the store, and it was easy as putting the ROMs on a thumbstick and without modding your system, playing some wonderful stuff. So that's why I like the Ouya. It wasn't because of its terrible store or terrible options to play games. I mean, it was bad, and I can admit to that.
Well, and you saw some of the more popular games like Towerfall. They did open it up to a larger audience eventually.
Yeah.
The Ouya just didn't take off, and I don't see why any new system would have anything different. I don't see why people would buy it when you can go and get a Super Nintendo or a clone console or whatever that's going to play a huge library of games plus new homebrews coming out. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I would classify systems such as the Retron 5 or the Retro Freak as replacement hardware. That is needed, and what makes those so popular too is that I have a fairly large game room. I have no space to hook up an additional systems. I mean, it's pointless. I'm not going to hook up a new hardware gaming machine just to play 2 or 3 games. It's going to collect dust. you know, what I'm going to play all the time is my Atari 7800, which plays all the 2600 games. My Super Nintendo that has, you know, a fantastic library. We got some awesome stuff back here. You know, my Sega CD, my Genesis, my you know, Master System. At least the Europeans had some good games, but
yeah, you're going to have the systems that play the best variety of good games.
Yeah,
you know, the largest variety of good games.
Correct, and it just doesn't make any sense making a retro gaming console that plays a fraction of the games, and then it has new games, but you can't play these on old systems, and you got to spend, you know, a couple $100 or $150 on it. It just doesn't make any sense. This is not a bag on anything. It's just, I don't need it. I don't want it. Not going to support it.
If they can't sell it to dorks like you and I, who are they going to sell it to?
Nobody.
And the other problem is, we saw in the mid-90s that companies were saying, oh, cartridges are expensive. You know, we got to move to CDs because they're $1 to press a CD instead of, you know, $12 to make a cartridge. That's still true, you know. So why would we go back to cartridges, which are going to have an end-user cost of $30, $40, $50, somewhere around there, when we've got digital distribution, which is essentially free, and we've got, you know, CDs and other types of media, all of which are way cheaper.
Yeah.
You know, for a small developer like a guy like me.
Yeah.
You know, I cannot afford to go print up 1,000 cartridges.
Correct.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Now, I can afford to put on Steam because, once again, it's free and it's a percentage. So, like, who are they marketing this to? You can't get developers because the costs are too high. There's not enough user base to support it. And the customers, you know, I don't think are there because, like we said, you and I, we're not going to be all that interested in something like that.
No, it's not. It's not a good option, and it's nothing against the people making it, but it's silly and it's unnecessary. So before we wrap up, Chris, I want to thank you for your time and showing your just a fraction of your game collection, and you know, I have some fond memories of working with you on Road Warriors, PRGE exclusive 2011.
Oh man,
yeah,
2011 or 2012. You know, we probably have a date on it.
You know what?
Don't have a date on it.
You know what's cool though is the upcoming PRGE. I'm actually going to be sharing a booth with you again. I'm really excited about that. We're going to have some new products there. And again, Chris, how do people? Chris, you want to talk about some of the products that you offer on your website?
Well, we do primarily reproduction games, so those are going to be your games that were released in Japan or Europe that were unplayable here or untranslated, which have now been translated and you can play them on US systems. Aside from that, we do fan hacks, which are games like Zelda Parallel Worlds, where they've taken Link to the Past and they've changed all the maps and all the enemies and made it essentially a sequel to the game. Prototypes, things like that. We do all that type of stuff at lostclassicvgs.com.
All right. Thank you very much for being on the channel.
Thank
you.
And
again, thank you. You're a great friend of mine. And comment below what you think. Do we need new retro gaming hardware? I'd love to hear about it. And until next week, you take care. Thank you, YouTube.